but it's also a good time for people to get together, and there's nothing better than going in a small group.
No, it does sound a lot of fun. But how do listeners find out more about your trips?
Most of our European Christmas market tours run from November to December. We start making bookings 12 months to 18 months in advance. Mm-hmm. And most of our tours offer an upgrade to our luxury silver service coach, which includes extra legroom, reclining seats, personal entertainment, a lovely rear lounge, plus much more. And 10 out of our guests choose silver service, so it's always best to book early to make sure you're not disappointed. What you could do is look on our website, which is www.ledger.co.uk, and we've got a wide selection of tours for you to go at, or just ring us and request a brochure.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thanks for your time. Hopefully we've encouraged a few listeners to go away. They may think it's the wrong time of year to talk about this sort of thing, but as you mentioned, they can book up early, so thank you.
It's actually interesting because we've already got a lot of people booked already, but as soon as we get past the sort of end of August when the schools are back, we get a lot of people booking Christmas market tours and Christmas tours.
Once again, Ledger's website is www.ledger.co.uk. And if you've got any tips on how to pronounce foreign words, please do let me know via facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show or via Twitter @holiday_hut, because I seriously do need some help on this matter. Checking it out before you check in on the John Guinn Travel Show on ukhealthradio.com. If you visited a Christmas market in Europe, please do share your photos at facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. It makes my Facebook page look a little bit more festive because it looks pretty bland at the moment. If you're a regular visitor to it, you know that for sure. Okay, winter sports. You know when you speak to an old person, they keep repeating the same stories to you? Well, I'm doing the same when it comes to winter sports. The closest I've got is a school trip to Austria, Innsbruck. And instead of going out on the slopes, I spent the day trying to chat up this girl who I fancied, and it didn't work out, so I didn't get the ski and I didn't get the girl. But I've not really fancied the snowboarding and the skiing anyway, to be perfectly honest. I've got very, very, very skinny ankles and I'm petrified they're not going to be able to take it. But for loads of people, especially some of my friends and ex-football colleagues, skiing is the thing to do. And for the youngsters, snowboarding. Although I did have a skateboard when I was a kid, way back in the day. It's basically a plank of wood with a couple of casters on it, compared to what you can get nowadays, but that's another story. So winter sports, I'm lucky, being just outside Milton Keynes, there's an indoor ski centre just up the road. I haven't actually used it yet, but I have pressed my nose up against the window to have a look when I've been waiting for my wife to finish some shopping in the area. So where better to go to find out more about winter sports and snowboarding than to speak to one of their instructors. So I had a chat with Simon Wilkinson years and years ago, actually. So again, like the last interview, the technique's a little bit scratchy. We carried out the interview actually in the first aid room, and the aircon decided to kick on, and you can probably hear that in the background. It wasn't very acoustically suitable for an interview, but it was quiet-ish. So winter sports, snowboarding. Let's stop me waffling and let's listen to an expert. And the expert, as I mentioned before, is Simon Wilkinson. What's the ideal snowboarding location?
I think snowboarders tend to like locations where there are very few paths. Now, whenever you're away on a ski holiday, you'll find in any mountain, there are access paths that get you from one area to the next area, or from one slope to the next slope. For skiers, that's not too bad because they have ski poles, they can push themselves along, but you'll find boarders much prefer to find areas where there are fewer paths and more kind of slight declines and slopes that they can go down, because paths are quite difficult for boarders to get along.
Mm-hmm. What equipment is required, or is it best to have your own kit, or is it okay to hire it? And finally, is there any maintenance you should do each day if you're snowboarding regularly?
Yeah, I think with regard to kit, the first piece of kit that anyone should really buy is a pair of boots, because the boots will often be shaped to the individual's feet. Whenever you rent a pair of boots, you'll find that they've been shaped by the people that have been in those boots before, and that can be any number of individuals. Mm-hmm. So I would always say to someone who's buying kit, aim for boots first, because they're going to give you a greater level of comfort and ultimately enjoyment on your holiday. With regard to kit itself, it can be quite expensive. So I would say to people, if you look like you're going to do the sport in the long term, then buy it, because it will be an investment and it will require some maintenance, maybe once a week, doing a little bit of waxing to keep the board fresh and a little bit of edging to keep the edges of the board sharp. But if you're not going to be doing it that regularly, maybe going once a year, every couple of years, then you might like to hire it, because it saves you having to carry the board out to the mountains and back again, and it also will mean that you'll be able to hire something relatively new every time, which means you'll be updating yourself or keeping up to date with the changes in the kit as well, by hiring it from the rental shop with their newest provision, if you like.
You mentioned edging. What's that?
So edging is where the snowboard, or skis in fact, they have metal edges down the side of them, and those are designed for gripping against the snow. Now, of course, you get different snow conditions, so you'll find that when the snow is firmer or a bit icier, you need your edges to be sharp in order for it to grip against the snow, and that's what's going to ultimately stop you or help you to change direction, so it creates some resistance against the snow. The sharper the edges, the better it will be at achieving that task, in theory.
In theory, okay. How easy is it to learn to be safe on a board?
I think with any sport you'll find there's an element of risk, and I think with skiing and snowboarding the biggest risk is for people to go into the sport without a level of training or education. As ski and snowboard instructors, our job is to help people to learn in a very safe environment, which is our number one priority. What we're trying to do is to create an environment and create a set of tasks that are within someone's ability, but developing them all the time and doing so safely. There is always going to be an element of risk, but we find those risks are massively increased when people aren't in the company of a qualified and experienced instructor.
So don't just hop on the board?
No, absolutely not.
What about tricks? What's a good one to start with?
I think for snowboarding and for skiers, the best way to start your tricks is to do it without using any features, so no jumps, no rails to start with. Mm-hmm. Tricks are great for helping you to balance and to be able to manoeuvre the board or the skis. So I would say the first thing that you want to learn is how to do small jumps and ollies, but doing it on flat land. And then from there you can start to look at doing flat land 180s, which would be a spin to face in the other direction, or even flat land 360s, which you can do. You just need a little bit of tuition, I think, for most people to get their head around how that would work, doing a full 360 spin without anything to jump off. But they are great ways of getting used to balancing on the board.
I'm assuming that doing a 360 you really need your boots to be good for you.
Yeah, obviously having the right kit is really going to help. That's not to say that you couldn't do it in any rental kit or borrowed kit, but I would say that it is going to be so much more comfortable whatever you do in your own equipment.
If somebody only goes snowboarding on a holiday, is there any risk of muscle injury?
Yeah, I think there always is with any sport. I think what people forget when they look at skiing and snowboarding is that it's a sport you might do for 6 or 7 hours a day, and that's a great deal of time. For me, I would say to anybody doing the sport, make sure you warm up effectively before you start. And what that means is it doesn't mean necessarily, kind of doing a couple of runs just to ease yourself into it, but actually physically warming yourself, so getting the blood pumping around the body, waking up body and mind, because you will need to think about what you're doing, and then to do some dynamic stretching, which is not standing there and pulling the muscles into a stretch and holding them for a second, but to do things like leg swings that gently stretch the muscle and prepare it for exercise. What you'll find is when people do the other type of stretching, static stretching, where you've seen people on a football field holding these stretches for a couple of minutes, the muscle actually responds to that by shortening immediately after, which actually can increase the risk of injuries. So it's really important to go through the right routine before you start.
What about the weeks leading up to the holiday? Should they do any exercises to strengthen their joints?
Yeah, absolutely. The research suggests that whenever you start a routine of exercise, be it a strength conditioning program, so that's your kind of gym resistance weights, or whether it's going to do sprints in a field, the first response is actually to increase the fluid around the joints, to allow the joints to move in a more fluid manner, for want of a turn of phrase. That in itself will help with going out and doing such large quantities of exercise on the hill. But there is no greater gain you will make to your skiing and your snowboarding than actually having a high level of fitness and strength. Those things alone will really help someone to achieve the most out of their holiday. And actually, from being an instructor, I've found that you'll get people from other sports who may be very good sportsmen in other sports, and they're just capable of brazening it through all their learning because they're strong enough to just give everything a go. Very interesting to see them achieving a great deal, but not necessarily being the most technically accurate. They're just strong enough to achieve it, so it does help.
Somebody sits on a couch like me all day, it's a lot. I shouldn't go straight into it, then I should exercise.
I think, yeah, if you're going to do it, it'd be worth you spending a little bit of time warming up for that holiday. I mean, if you imagine going on a football training camp and spending 6 hours a day for 5 days or 6 days on a camp, you'd probably be quite fatigued by the end of it. And I think that in itself will increase the risk of injury.
Hello, it's Roy. Yeah, we're on the ferry. We should be in Spain tomorrow afternoon.
Well, be careful. Lots of crooks on the roads out here.
Crooks? You know where I grew up.
This is different. They target British registered vehicles.
Yeah, they used to do that round my way.
I'm serious. They'll tell you there's something wrong with your car, so you pull over, then they rob you. Or they distract you at a motorway stop. They target hire cars, too.
Hire cars?
Yeah, well, they're driven by tourists.
Oh, OK, I'll watch out.
Good. So, looking forward to the drive down?
Yeah, well, I was.
Thieves in Spain have been targeting hire cars and UK-registered vehicles, so be extra careful on the roads. For details, visit gov.uk and search for Living in Spain.
You're listening to The Travel Show with John Guinn on ukhealthradio.com. You mentioned earlier about doing 6 or 7 hours up on the slopes. Is that people are going to be determined to get the most out of their holiday? Day one, is that really a realistic amount of time to spend up there?
Yes, it is, if you've done the right preparation. And I think that goes back to our previous question. If you've done the right preparation, then by all means go out for 6 hours. But what I would do is I would take note of your fatigue levels. I would be especially cautious after your big lunch that's probably going to be full of cheese for most people when they get their first day in the Alps. And I would, at that stage, I'd be thinking to myself, what do I really want to achieve after lunch? Because that's when your body's committing a lot of energy to digesting all the food you've had. And it's probably not as awake, and you may have had 1 or 2 glasses of wine as well with your lunch. So that's the stage where you'll find that the P-sters are busiest, and these are the guys that are out there picking up the people that have injured themselves on the hill. So they normally, between 2 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon is when they've got to do the majority of their work. So there is evidence to suggest that that's the time that people might increase the risk of injury. So I would say to anyone, on your first day on your holiday, warm up effectively, spend the day getting to know the resort and getting to know the areas that you're going to be skiing most. And that should really be your main target, because then you'll know when you go out there on the second day and you start to increase the intensity, you're going to know what's coming on the runs, you're going to know what to look for, and you'll probably be a little bit more aware of your surroundings than if you go out there on day one doing the same thing and you fly over the brow of a hill and you suddenly realise the piste ends and has a dog leg to the left. You're going to wish you'd had a look at that beforehand, so...
Yeah, I've been on a motorbike and thought that sometimes.
There you go.
I guess most groups are a mix of skiers and snowboarders. Have you got any experience of what would be a good resort for a group like that?
Yeah, I think really it's less about the mix of people, but more about, first of all, what level of ability everybody has. You'll find that in most magazines that you'll pick up, that are showing you where to go on holiday, so your holiday brochures, they'll have a certain level of information about what grades of slope are available in a resort and how many there are. So the first thing you want to do is always look to go somewhere that meets the needs of the weakest individual of the group, and I mean that in the best possible way. If you've got someone in there who's a beginner, it's no good going to a resort where there are very few beginner slopes, because that will immediately limit them, and it will also mean that they might be encouraged to go on something that's beyond their ability, irrespective of whether they're a skier or snowboarder. The best course of action would be to find a resort that is most suited to your less experienced member, and then make sure that there is a provision in there for people who are more experienced. So a couple of red runs and black runs, and you'll find that the runs are graded in colour. So green would be your beginner run, blue for the slightly more experienced, so your early intermediates, reds for your intermediates to advance, and blacks for those people who've got the confidence to go beyond the red runs and find something a little bit more steeper, so your expert skiers.
We mentioned about having exercise and making sure your joints are ready, but would you say you're best off going to somewhere like Sno Zone here and having a few hours before you go away?
Yes. The reason for that, there's 2 very good reasons. One of which is, when you first go to a resort, there's a lot of stuff to learn in a very short space of time. Now, you've paid a lot of money, I'd assume, to go out and do a ski and snowboard holiday. That can really be wasted if you're going to spend the first 3 days on a nursery slope out there. What's more is you can't always tell the weather conditions when you go out. So you might turn up in the resort, find that the snow quality or the weather is so bad, then in the first couple of days you really can't move off the nursery slopes. You're stuck there. by coming to an environment like Sno Zone or any of the UK snow days, what it allows you to do is to